Good morning. Morning. How are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? How's your weekend been? It is 10 to 10 in the morning. I don't think I've ever done a live stream on a Sunday morning, so would you like to come to the Church of Cheryl for a little sermon? So what I wanted to talk about today was Infinity War for a few reasons. As I spray my enthusiasm everywhere. We're going to talk Infinity War for a couple reasons. And the first reason is obviously part 7 of the Odinsons Family Drama. We're going to get this fucking series complete today. I'm going to do another live tonight and wrap up Endgame because we want to get the series done. I should have started it earlier. It's obviously around Thor Love and Thunder, but I should have started it earlier on. The movie's been released, but we're going to finish it because this is an important character. And this family, the Odinsons, are so ripe and juicy with things we can look at and help to understand ourselves and our own family dynamics. So, number one, we want to get the Odinson Family Drama series finished. But two, I want to really help you to understand, and this is my main goal today, rather than psychoanalyzing the shit out of Thor, is to help you to understand why we feel what we feel towards characters and why the feeling of loss is so profound and so deep and so real when we see a character that we care about die on screen. Now, there is a trigger warning on the thumbnail. I'm going to say it verbally as well. We are going to be talking about the first 10 minutes of Infinity War. We all know what happens. We all know what that was about. And therefore, to just move my Wi-Fi router. I've got a very messy desk here. It's all a bit chaotic. We're going to talk about the first 10 opening minutes of Infinity War. I've had 2 cups of tea and I'm still not really quite awake. And so we know what happens in the first 10 minutes. It's very upsetting, violent, graphic, gratuitously violent, some may say. And so if that's upsetting for you, just please know that that's where we're going. And yeah, I want to help you understand why it is that scene, Loki's death, was so upsetting for so many of us. I want to give you some context. When I watched it in 2017, I was very deep in the fandom. And so it was really upsetting to see it. And I didn't understand why. And it reminded me of, for those of you that are OGs, that are my age, that understand this. Do you remember when Titanic was released in the cinema? Do you remember what it was like when Rose was like, there's a boat, Jack. There's a boat, Jack. I'm like, oh my God, he's not responding. It was like that. It's up there for on-screen trauma. So let's help you to understand why it is that we feel this when a character we love dies on screen. There's a very important psychological and emotional lesson. And before I get into that, let me know in the comments below, what are your theories? What do you think the reason is that we feel the pain and the loss so deeply when the character we love dies? Why do you think that is? Let me know. I'd love to hear your theories. Before we do, quick intro. I'm Cheryl Muir, relationship expert. I am a coach, been coaching for 8 years, also training to be a counsellor, fun fact, studying mental health at the moment as well. Very interesting stuff. And this is Love and Fandom, where we believe the relationships we see on the screen help us to understand ourselves at a deeper level and have a better relationship with ourselves and each other. Meaning, when we watch these films, we can understand more about ourselves, our emotions, our inner world, right? There's a whole thing of like Marvel paying for our therapy. Well, let's use it. Let's use it to go deeper. So if you like the arts, Marvel, and also personal growth, personal development, and your inner world, then this is the place to be. Thanks for being here. Welcome. So let's talk about this. Opening 10 minutes of Infinity War, possibly the most traumatic opening scene of a movie that I've personally ever seen. I'm going to tell you a bit of a story. 'Tis personal. Then after that, we're going to get into the actual reasons as to why this was really, really hard for so many of us. So when I watched this film, it was 2017. It's a dark and stormy night. It was 2017, and I was very deep in the fandom, both Tom Hiddleston fandom, Loki fandom. Many of you know this about me. Some of you may or may not. We'll see. And the people that are in the fandom now, some of you really relate to me, my work. Some of you really don't, and that's all okay. So it's okay to have different opinions about people, right? But in 2017, I was really deep in the fandom. And so this is the first, Infinity War is the first Marvel film I saw in theatres. I wasn't as deep into the MCU at that time, other than the Thor series, the Thor franchise. I saw this film and I remember seeing the opening 10 minutes and just like trembling and shaking, right? And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was very much in denial. I was waiting for him to like pop up again, waiting for Loki to pop up again somewhere else in the film, which obviously didn't happen. Here's what's interesting and why I really want you to know about this, is that I then went to watch rewatched Infinity War last summer, and the movie after the opening scene was brand new to me. I didn't remember any of it. My brain did not have a memory of it. None of it was familiar. None of it was familiar. I didn't remember any of it. The candle's just gone out, very spooky. A message from the gods. I did not have any recollection of the film that I'd seen. Why is that? Because when something incredibly traumatic happens, our brain can stop processing memory. And it does that to protect us. So we remember the emotions of something that was extremely difficult to witness. And our memory before it or after it may be completely severed, because our brain's doing that to protect us. It gets into like procedural memory and how memory is formed and all kinds of brain neurology shit that is a bit above my pay grade, but the point is, we'll remember things like sounds, very specific images, and we may not remember anything after it. Or it may feel like a blur, or it may feel like it's going in slow motion. There's lots of reasons as to why that is. But what I want you to know is this. The reason that happened to me and why it might have happened to you, and let me know if it did. Let me know if this is familiar to you, sounds familiar, because I'm sure this isn't an isolated event. We cannot tell the difference emotionally between what is real and what is imagined. Therefore, when you see a death on the screen of a character that you love, your emotions, your psychology, your brain, your body is responding in exactly the same way as if this happened in real life. Because the emotions that you feel for this character are real. Even though you know that the character's quote unquote not real and the relationship you have towards them is not real, notwithstanding shifting, which by the way, shifting is a whole other conversation, and we can talk about the quantum and what that is. I mean, it's all kind of mind-blowing stuff, but the point is you are a person that's grounded into reality. You know what's real and what's not real. But I want you to know the emotion you feel for this character is real, even though you know the character isn't and the relationship isn't. This isn't like some delusional thing, right? The emotions you feel are real. So if you feel genuine love and affection towards this character and you, through a screen, see this character get murdered, your emotions, your psychology, your brain, your whole nervous system, your whole entire body is responding in the exact same way as if someone you love was in front of you getting murdered and executed. That's why I put the trigger warning at the start of the video, by the way. It is the same. I want you to understand that. Because when we feel strong emotions towards a character, it can be a very confusing thing. We know it feels real, but we know that it's not real, and we kind of like deny it and push it down, suppress it, and it creates this like contraction within us of like shame and denial and all these things. I just want you to know those feelings are real. By the way, I have a training on this called Fangirl Obsession Decoded. Perhaps it's not the best name for the training because it's actually not necessarily about obsession, though it will teach that, but it'll teach you about the emotional connection you have to these characters and why that is. Details are in the comments below and the pinned comment and also in the video description. It's really very good, this training. It's really very, very good. So if you're interested in this and why it is that you have a strong emotional connection to a character and why perhaps that's a separate thing. The emotional connection to the character is one thing. Obsession, fantasy relationships, and slightly avoidant attachment tendencies are a separate thing, but they overlap and they can feed into each other. I'll talk more about that in a second if that's confusing. But if that's something you want to know more about, then I would take that training. It's really going to help you. And I also answer questions in it every Friday. So it's there if you need it. All that to say that that's what's happening. Which makes me think, does Marvel know this? Does Marvel have a technical advisor that's in psychology and emotional regulation and all of that? If not Marvel, you can very well bring me on board. However, you know that that's what happens. And why is it that they chose to take perhaps the most loved character, would you say, in terms of fandom and fans? I don't think there's any other character in the MCU that's as loved. Maybe Steve, maybe Peter, maybe Nat. But in terms of like the fans, like the ferocity of the fans, I don't think we've had a reaction like we've seen to Loki. I also did a video on why that is, by the way, decoding the Loki thirst and why that kind of exploded back in 2012, 2013 after the Avengers. Marvel knows that. They've kind of used this character as a cash cow over the years, right? Which is another topic for another time. But if you know this is the most loved character, why give him the most graphic death? Not the most graphic death in terms of what happened, but in terms of how it was filmed, the close-ups, the sound, the tears of blood, the blood coming out of his nose, the neck snapping. And I don't say that to trigger anyone, I'm sorry if it does. Simply describing what we saw on the screen. Very traumatic, very traumatic. So I hope that helps you to understand why that might have been really, really difficult to watch. And any character, that would apply to any character. I'm going to say something really bold here. I believe Marvel has a responsibility and a duty of care when things like this are coming up on screen. Like in Moon Knight, for example, I did a video on that too. Moon Knight was bringing up childhood trauma, and there's not really, sometimes there's like a little flash at a black screen with some white writing saying if this has affected you, call this number or whatever, but they're not really setting anything up. And I think they should. If they're bringing up people's trauma, I think they should offer some kind of support services, some kind of trainings, is what I think. Maybe disagree, let me know. So that is why when we see Thor in Infinity War, it's really, really hard for us to see him watching this happen, because we're watching it happen too. So we understand, and this is why we empathize with Thor so much, because like, God, that's fucking traumatic. Now, specific to Thor and his journey, this is a real change for him because he's helpless. There's a whole fight sequence and the Hulk gets involved. There's that whole bit, and Loki kind of launches at his brother and protects his brother, and they dive out of the way. But ultimately, it ends with Thor being, kind of muscled, and again, Marvel with the muscling. Why? Kind of wrapping him in this iron so he can't move, and he watches his brother be murdered, and he can't do anything about it. What else do I want to say about this? This is really the beginning of the end for Thor. Really, Ragnarok was the beginning of the end. He is someone that's experienced so much loss. He lost his mother in the Dark World. He lost his father in Ragnarok. Now his brother's been murdered. So what happens next is the Guardians become his adopted family. What do they call him? Don't they call him like a pirate angel or something? It looks like a pirate, like, had sex with an angel. I'm like, that's pretty much what happened, isn't it? Frigga and Odin. Don't really want to think about that. Anyway, they call him some kind of like pirate angel. There's the whole thing of like, what he looks like and all that. So they become his adopted family, and there's that really emotional scene where he says like, what more can I lose? And then he also has this relationship with his hammer that's brought to light, because he doesn't have his hammer anymore. So who is Thor without the hammer? We've talked about this in other videos, but his worthiness is tied to this external object. So just look at where that might be present for you in your life. Where's your worthiness tied to something outside of you, to receiving the money, receiving the success, receiving the brand sponsorship deal, if you're a content creator, you do cosplay professionally, whatever it is. Like, yes, all those things are really nice to have, and yes, we get to have them, and yes, we're worthy of them, and yes, it's safe to have them, and our worthiness is not tied to it. Let me tell you, I've had some wonderful experiences in my career, but they don't change how you feel and think about yourself. Only you can do that. Only you can do that internally, right? It gives us a boost temporarily, but it doesn't change our identity. We have to do that. We have to integrate that experience. So, for example, I was on BBC Radio 1 last year, not once, but twice, live on air for an hour the first time, an hour and 15 minutes the first time, 45 minutes the second time. There are like famous people that don't get that kind of airtime. You cannot buy that kind of airtime. And this isn't a humble brag. It's like just a brag, because I'm fucking proud of myself. So I was on BBC Radio 1 talking about relationships and psychology and dating and all of that, talking to Vic Hope and Katie Thistleton on Life Hacks on a Sunday. It's on today, actually. And they were so wonderful and so kind and so generous, and the producer was amazing, and he works at the BBC Radio 2 breakfast show with Zoe Ball now. Wonderful people, wonderful experience. I was so grateful. I was so present. I couldn't believe it. I was just like absolutely over the moon with it. And then, a few days after, I just kind of felt the same. And that's because something outside of ourselves can't make us feel different about ourselves. We have to do that first. It's identity work. It's work around our self-worth, around how we view ourselves. Nothing outside of ourselves can change that. And so we see this with Thor, right? With the hammer. Like, this symbolizes my worthiness. Are you Thor, the god of hammers? No, but he's been told, like, if whosoever holds this hammer, should they be worthy, will possess the power of Thor. Like, Odin said that, so we can't really be surprised that Thor does have this god of hammer thing, because he's been told, like, your worthiness is tied to whether or not you can pick this thing up. That's pretty fucked up. That's kind of like the family that says you're worthy when you get straight A's, or you're only worthy when you get an A star, or you're worthy when this happens. And it's not necessarily said explicitly in families, but it's said more subtly. Or you're only worthy of my love and attention when you're going through a crisis. That's an interesting pattern. So when we can create these patterns of drama and chaos, because we think that's the only time we're going to get some love and attention, right? Maybe you grew up in a chaotic home where there was a lot of shit going on, but you did receive attention when there was a crisis. And so we can find these really fucked up ways to get the attention we crave by creating chaos and drama in our lives today. And that's because we have this neural pathway that says, if you want love, you have to be in some kind of crisis situation. So just something to think about, something to look at. My point with that was to say what? The Thor is from this family where his worthiness is tied to this external thing, and we see that change in Love and Thunder, of course. But he lost his hammer, so here he is now on the way to Nidavellir. Is that what it's called, Nidavellir? The elf place, the dwarf place, but they're not dwarves; they're like giants. Anyway, he goes to Nidavellir. That's not the name, is it? What's the place called? With the rings and the where he holds the thing and the Stormbreaker. You know the place I'm talking about. Nidavellir. Nidavellir. Let me know in the comments if that's right. There's a lot of films in the MCU. It's hard to remember everything. And those of you that do, like, you have beautiful big brains, like, bless you. But I don't always remember it. So he goes there. He creates Stormbreaker. And this is when he really starts to carve his own path as a hero. He's like, I've lost everything. I might die. It's worth a shot. I have to do this. I have to, and it's not so much I have to save the world. It's all on my shoulders. It's I personally want to do this. I want to avenge this motherfucker that murdered my brother. I want to avenge my brother. Because he said, you'll die for that. He says those words after Loki's murder. He said, you will die for that. And he keeps his word. He's a man of his word. He wants to avenge his brother's death, and he risks his life in order to do so. Because that's what heroes do. So then he rocks up in that really iconic scene. He rocks up on Wakanda with Stormbreaker, has that little back and forth with Steve. They're like, oh, you're copying my beard. Blah, blah, blah. We know Steve then gets to hold Mjolnir, but not until Endgame. So he's taking on this role now of leader, not in a lone wolf way, though, in the way of, like, I'm here and I'm going to help you all out because I want to, not because I have to, not because it's who I am, but because I want to. That's explored as well in Love and Thunder, in terms of, like, he's just waiting around for someone to ask him to save the day, and then he does it on his own. So anything that's directed by Taika Waititi, though I do love his movies, it's like the characterization, it's like it's not consistent really at all. But that's another conversation for another time. So we see him as being this lone wolf again in Thor Love and Thunder, and sort of going backwards initially, which I'm just going to put down to the writing. But in Infinity War, he does want to help his team, his Avengers. And he rocks up with, I think, Groot and Rocket. And he's like, let's fuck shit up. Also Groot joining in. He's on his, like, video game, because he's like teenage Groot now. And then he gives his arm for Stormbreaker. It always makes me cry, that bit. I don't know why. I think maybe because I love Groot, and I think he's, like, really, like, a sweet little soul. I don't know. We saw him as a baby. I don't know why I'm crying. Maybe I have PMS. But the point is, it's like a really sweet moment, right, with him kind of sacrificing and wanting to help. Also, Marvel's very clever, aren't they? Because I'm reading a book right now called Primal Branding. I'm damn sure Kevin Feige's read it, because It talks about icons and symbols and rituals, and Stormbreaker is that. So people that haven't seen a Marvel film will just see this like axe, but we see, oh, that was, you know, he had to hold the thing open, the collapsing dying star, and he almost died, and then the metal was melted, and then it's the arm of Groot. Like it's all symbolic for us, it all means something. And so we really invest in these symbols and these icons and rituals because it has meaning, and Marvel does that so brilliantly, and that's why we're such big fans of them. I think Disney is a very interesting case study in branding and fan loyalty. If you ever want to read a book called Superfans, very, very interesting in terms of fandom and frankly business. So anyway, all of that to say, the biggest incident for Thor, the biggest event for Thor, is the loss of his brother and Heimdall and the Asgardians. This is obviously devastating for him. It also loops back to the premonition that Heimdall had, or that Thor had. He had a premonition where he saw Heimdall, where Heimdall said, and this was in Age of Ultron, "You're a destroyer, Odinson." Now, I don't think that's actually true of Thor at all, but Thor, with Ragnarok and then with Infinity War, it's all going Pete Tong. Do you know what I mean? It's all going Pete Tong for him, which means wrong in Cockney rhyming slang for those of you that are not British. It's all going Pete Tong. Everyone's dying around him, and he's helpless. And it's a lot. We're going to cover the aftermath of these events in Endgame. We will come to that. I also think it's worth saying, what do we want to say about this? So you know the opening 10 minutes of Infinity War, and how the opening scene, the opening shot of the refugee vessel and Thanos and his ship coming into view. Is it called Sanctuary, that big thing? Kind of ironic because it's not Sanctuary, it's like a murder vessel. And there's the voiceover, which is Kenneth Branagh, fun fact. And he's saying, God, when I hear this, it's just so chilling. It's brilliant cinematography and writing, but it's like emotionally so chilling. It makes me tremble and shake. But he says there are Asgardian families on board. We're not soldiers. This is a refugee vessel. And then the next scene is the Moor, Ebony Moor, stepping over the Asgardians. And there's something about that scene that I remember seeing that, and I was just like shaking and crying, because it just reminds me of like these civilizations of people that are so peaceful, that are attacked and killed. And that, let's be honest, that happens in our world too, right? Sometimes we watch these movies to escape or to learn things about ourselves, but there's something about that has this chilling realism where that's happened. I see Asgardians as being this is just my own headcanon really, but being this really peaceful civilization. And I'm not talking about the royal family and their army. They're very much like ancient Rome, like war and invading and all that. There's some problems there, I know. I'm talking about the Asgardian people. I see them as being very advanced beings, very peaceful souls, very advanced in their technology, but also I think in their spirituality. They're immortal. Well, not immortal. The gods are immortal. How long do Asgardians live though? So they have the same lifespan as like Loki and Thor and Odin, notwithstanding their untimely deaths. Certainly for Loki, he died at about 1050, is he? 1024, 1048? I've seen various different ages. Let me know Loki's age down below, because I don't know if Marvel have ever really confirmed how old he actually is. Thor says he's 1500. I've seen 1500 years and I've killed twice as many. So actually, Thor has killed more people than Loki, like much more. Loki killed a measly 80 people, then saved thousands of Asgardians. But anyway, I will do a series on Loki's journey, like when the series is released next year, in the lead up to that. But Asgardians live a long time, and there's something about living for thousands of years that, you know, makes them very wise and noble, and I think they're very peaceful, honorable people, and to see them all lying there was just really, it makes me really upset. I find it really, really chilling and That's why watching Love and Thunder was so beautiful, because some of them are on Earth and then they're okay, but there's something about that on like a soul level, like chills me to the core. It's beautiful cinematography, but just emotionally, it's just devastating. And then of course, it's not just the Asgardians; it's what happens with Thor and Loki, and then we see that close up of Loki, and he has these. I thought this was really quite brilliantly done, but again, very chilling. Where we don't see what Thanos does, and that's what makes it so disturbing, because you're imagining what's happened. You see the distress call that Kenneth Branagh makes, not Kenneth Branagh, but whoever that Asgardian voice is, and he calls all ships in the area, which of course is when the Guardians of the Galaxy come in and save Thor's life, essentially. Why could Thor survive floating in space? Because in the other Guardians series, in what's his name, Kondu? That's not his name, is it? Blue face thing. It's not called Kondu, is it? Why can't I remember his name? You know who I mean, though, right? Like when he's in space, he passes. So I don't know why Thor. Is it because he's a god? But I still don't think you can survive floating in space, because Loki technically wouldn't have done, but he fell through a wormhole. Can they just be out in space and be fine? Or is this just an inconsistency in the writing of the MCU? I don't understand the rules of this universe. Anyway, so the distress call is the reason why Thor's rescued. And I had a point that I was going to make with that. Oh yeah, what is really, really chilling is that we don't know what happens after. They make this distress call. You can hear this urgency in his voice, this desperation of like, don't attack us. We're no threat. And he makes it an SOS call. And then the next thing we see is Thanos just kind of like walking around. Or Thanos is stood there and it's Ebony Maw walking around. And what I found especially chilling is on Loki's face, there's these like dots. It's like 4 fingerprints. Like, can you see like what happens on my head there? Like, you can see where fingers have been. And it's like black and sooty. There's so much that's inferred by that we can imagine what happened, and our brain starts to kind of fill in the gaps, right? And they're all terrified. Loki's really disturbed, especially because of Thanos and what happened with him and his trauma. And again, I'll do a separate series on Loki next year, or maybe you want that sooner. Like, let me know. I'm happy to talk about it. But from how Loki looks, he's really disturbed. He's obviously he's got a history with Thanos and their cronies and the other, and Ebony Maw probably as well. Very sadistic group of people. He's really frightened. Loki's really frightened, and he sort of tries to strike this deal and then cross him. There's a whole thing. And he saves his brother. And Thor equally can't save the day. So it's just very disturbing how it's done. Like, we don't know what happens, but we can imagine what occurred. Let me know, did you feel the same about the Asgardians dying? I don't know how many of them perished. I don't know how many it was. And I don't know, Valkyrie. Where was Valkyrie? Valkyrie obviously wasn't in Infinity War, so that's a bit of a plot hole. But we know that, of course, she is now King of Asgard on Earth, now in the current timeline. I don't know where Love and Thunder is in the main timeline. Does anyone know? I don't. Do they know? Maybe not. So I don't know how Valkyrie fits into what happens at the start of Infinity War. I would have loved for her to be in it, maybe. Is she an Endgame, though? I think she's an Endgame. I'll get to Endgame next. Point is to say, the death of the Asgardians for me is something that was really, really upsetting. And the reason is, like, there's something real there. There's something real emotionally. For me, the real thing is, like, seeing the massacring of, like, a group of peaceful, innocent people. And that does happen. That does happen on this crazy planet on which we live. But the way that we change this crazy blue and green ball in the sky that we're on, that's hurtling through space right now, crazy. The way that we change it is we change ourselves. And when I say change ourselves, I just mean connect to our emotions. Our emotions are the key. In Love and Thunder, this is a spoiler if you haven't seen it, they need a key to get to eternity. And the key is, spoiler, Stormbreaker. The key to us understanding ourselves is our emotions. That's the key that unlocks everything. We have to be really in touch with our emotions. And that's why film and television is so beautiful, because it has this way of eliciting our emotions. So we can come out of the theatre and just feel like our nervous system's all fucked up and, we don't know what to do with it. But if we can understand why, that goes a long way to understanding ourselves at a deeper level and accepting ourselves at a deeper level. I think it was Carl Rogers that said, only the curious paradox is only when I accept myself, only then I can change. Something. Which means that if you're fighting this emotional connection you have to a character, you're not going to be able to get any kind of wisdom from that or change it if you choose. So if I were you, I would go through Fangirl Obsession Decoded, which is really going to help you understand that, and it also gives you a chance to get on the VIP list for Fangirl to Fiance. If you want to go from being the fangirl to being the fiance, this is the program for you. It's one of my very favorite programs that I've ever created, and what we're doing with the programs now is they're all launching twice a year. So we have Fangirl to Fiance, then Siren, which is about sexuality, which is enrolling right now. Details down below if you're interested. And then after that, we're going to have the Love Formula, and then it'll just cycle twice a year. So basically every 6 months, there's a new cycle. We're in the Siren cycle, we'll be in the Love Formula cycle, and then we'll be in the Fangirl to Fiance cycle. So Fangirl to Fiance will be enrolling in November, so not yet, but get yourself in that training so that when it does come out, you have the opportunity to get in early if you want to, or if you don't want to, that's okay too. Whew, this was a lot of things. It's a lot of things. If you want more on any of these characters, there's a series I did on Loki, which if I do recall, I was wearing the very same outfit because I really like to dress. I did do a series on Loki. It's about the series though. My viewpoint on it now is slightly different, but if you want to just look at his journey, that might be interesting for you if you want to watch that series. There's a whole series on Thor. This is part 7, the penultimate part. And later on tonight, I'm going to wrap up the Thor series with Endgame, and we're really going to look at why it is that Thor, well, no, we know why it is. We're basically going to look at what happened to Thor in Endgame and the result of all the trauma that he's been through and what we can learn about ourselves and our journey through that. Okay, this is a lot of things. Thank you for being here. I've been Cheryl Muir. This has been Love and Fandom. You know what to do. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Share it. Give me a comment down below. Comment down below if you got to the end. Comment the phrase for Asgard. For Asgard. Let's honour the Asgardians in that way. Thank you for being here. I will see you next time. And remember, you are absolutely worthy of love. See you next time.